negative portrayals that we are accusing Caucasians of having in their movies. My dear issue, what's the name of
Tyler Perry.
Tyler Perry. Don't you think that some of Tyler Perry's movies are actually reinforcing some of the negative stereotypes that you're talking about?
Um, I feel like it really depends on the situation because even though Tyler Perry does have some negative stereotypes in his films, the portrayal is still different because he may have like a drug dealer or a drug addict being played by an African American in his film, but they're still characterized in a way that you can feel for them and you can like connect to them. So they're not being portrayed as a villain. They're just being portrayed as someone who has a problem. So uh, a creator deciding to represent a character that way, like that also comes into play when it regarding like regarding the reception it's going to receive.
Mm-hmm.
So Black creators, they can have characters like that in their films. They just have to be mindful of how exactly are they portraying them? Are they portraying them as a redeemable character, or is it someone that's just completely evil? Because in a film made by a white person or Caucasian who has an African American playing that role, more often than not, there's nothing redeemable about them. They're seen as evil. But for an African American, they may be showing those negative stereotypes, but at least you would expect them to know more about it because they themselves are African American. So they're still telling their own story.
All right, thank you very much. Let's open this to other participants who may want to ask questions of either Alexis or Ms. Crawford.
How often did you see African Americans portrayed in film positively during your research?
During my research, one of the things I did was a focus group, and when it came to the positive portrayals, I asked my focus group what movies came to mind um, when they thought about African Americans in positive light, and there were only really two films that they can really think of off the top of their head, and those films were Black Panther and The Pursuit of Happiness. And The Pursuit of Happiness kind of shows what my other point, because even though The Pursuit of Happiness had a African American that was down on his luck and was struggling, my focus group still believed that that was a positive portrayal because he was shown to be strong and smart and persevering. So when it came to my research, those are the two films that I focused on. And I also did a content analysis, and in that content analysis, the films that I went through were The Help, Moonlight, and Black Panther. So those are the main films that I discussed during my research.
Okay, other questions, please?
Hi. The phrase often goes, art imitates life, but with this scenario, would you say that was more so that since these films have depicted us in such a negative light, that sometimes it like influences our psyche, and in the community, we have in a way began to perpetuate and double down on these stereos that are often depicted in films?
Um, I agree, but I wouldn't necessarily say that our psyche our psyche is affected by it, but I feel like rather than making us act in a certain way, it makes us view our own behavior in a certain way. Because when you look at racist portrayals in films, you also have to look at what the creator was trying to make you think about the film. Because when it comes to things like drug use and breaking the law, there are many Caucasian movies who show Caucasians doing those exact same things, but the way that it's portrayed is as if it's them having fun and not being criminals. Yet a African American movie can show the same things, but the theme of it is different. But because automatically those African Americans who are doing the same things that the Caucasians were doing in their movies, they're lesser people for participating in the same behavior. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's affecting it's affecting African Americans' behavior, making them be more criminal because they constantly see it. It just affects the way that they view the criminal behavior or criminal behavior.
Can Ms. Crawford chime in on that?
I just thought that my thinking is that it's about balancing, and filmmaking has, as the young man mentioned or started off by saying, art. So filmmaking is not necessarily intended to be documentary evidence of something, that there's a lot of creative liberties that directors and producers are taking. So I believe that many people of color have grown to be able to separate a film from reality, and that these portrayals of, yes, there might be a drug addicted mom or somebody, a Black person stealing something, but I think in more recent years people are able to separate and say, I'm watching this film purely for the enjoyment of it, and that it's not it doesn't represent who we are as a people. I think we've taken on the position of separating it. This is for entertainment, but this is, in reality, we know that people of color are represented in all areas of life.
And to add to that, and I'm not sure who asked the question, but it seemed like you were saying that does it affect African American psyche? I feel like it more so affects the psyche of non-African Americans, because even though African Americans themselves may know, well, this is not reality because I don't act like this and my family doesn't act like this. There are people who may have never met African American in their lives, and they're getting all their information about African Americans from these films with these negative portrayals, and it's a constant thing that they're seeing. So they start to believe that it represents reality, and that's why you'll have individuals from countries where there's a very small African American population, they themselves have some negative views on African Americans, and that's because of the film. So it affects non-African American psyche more than it affects African American psyche.
I agree with that. As we have mentioned in class before, even this has affected many Africans that I interact with. When I talk to some of my brothers and sisters back home, they wonder how I am coping with the so unruly and criminal African Americans. And if only I could see them face to face, I would punch them in the face for their ignorance, okay? But yes, we may wave it off as ignorance, but that is their reality. And that reality came from watching American movies and the portrayals of African Americans in such movies. So, Ms. Crawford, yes, we may be separating fiction from reality, but somehow there are a number of people who are not that sophisticated, and they still take these images and portrayals hook, line, and sinker. So I'm just wondering, this is a question at the end of this commentary, that this so-called systemic racism that we have in America is actually being reinforced by these negative portrayals, and that these people cannot look beyond the reality of that images and the movies that they see. So they are not critical consumers of these images, and they believe them to be real, even in America. Perhaps that will be one of the contributors to persistent racism in America, don't you think?
Yes, I do. I do agree that it's the